Good morning, everyone. We're about 2 minutes out to getting started with our Governor's Task Force on Student Debt public meeting. We'll be with you shortly. Good morning, everyone. This is Michelle Rein from DadCap. I'm going to wait 1 more minute because there's a bunch of people coming into the room all at once before we get started. So just all right, it looks like most everyone is here from my review. This is Michelle Reinen from DadCap, and I'm your facilitator for the Governor's Task Force on Student Debt. I just want to remind everyone that this is a public meeting and it is being recorded, and that recording will post on the website following the meeting. And with that said, I will turn it over to our chair, Secretary Blumenfeld from Department of Financial Institutions.
Great. Thank you, Michelle, and good morning, everyone. Welcome back to meeting number 6. Thank you to all of you who submitted proposal solution summaries. With 37 proposed solution summaries, I think we have 32 task force members, so 37 proposed solution summaries. We certainly have no shortage of great ideas for how the state and our other stakeholders can help student loan borrowers of today and tomorrow. You should have received all 37 proposed solution summaries broken down by work group in an email last Friday, and again this morning for easy reference during today's meeting. Now, we did get a few bounce backs this morning and tried to break the email in two and resend it. So if you didn't get it this morning, please chat us and let us know that so we can continue to work on. There were about 7 bounce backs that happened. So we want to make sure that everybody got the information. Again, you were also emailed the proposal summaries last Friday. We just wanted you to have them this morning for easy reference. Hopefully, you've all had some time, taken some time to review the proposals and are ready for a dynamic discussion today as we winnow down the proposed solutions in our work group efforts. And speaking of this morning's email, I also want to bring to your attention a new student loan borrower perspective that we received from Carla Weber. Carla successfully repaid her student loans and tells her story. And I'd encourage you all to read Carla's really great story. Also, please take a few minutes to review this new tool, if you'd advance the slide once, it was released last week and really re-released. They really enhanced it from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the CFPB. The tool is called Your Financial Path to Graduation, and it's an interactive tool designed to help students understand their financial aid offers and decide if the school they've been accepted to is a good financial fit. Right now, the CFPB is looking for high schools, colleges, and college access organizations to pilot the tool during the upcoming school year. And pilot participants will receive free support from the CFPB in preparing to use the tool during the 2021 school year. And to learn more about it, you can click on the web address that's on the slide. And finally, I want to give you a heads up about two very timely studies, if you move to the next slide, that we'll be sharing with you as a follow-up email from today's meeting. Again, we didn't want to completely inundate you yesterday, but these two studies were just recently released, and we think they're important work in terms of our body of knowledge and understanding. The first study is Shadow Student Debt, and it's produced by the Student Borrower Protection Center and was released late last week. And the study is a follow-on to Seth Frotman's presentation at our last task force meeting. It highlights alternative forms of credit and debt taken on by students to pay for college, focusing on for-profit schools across the country. The report describes in detail how this debt is proliferated, often targeting the most vulnerable students in the American higher educational system. A Wisconsin-specific handout will also be included. The second study is from Nick Hillman and is the College Student Debt, What State and Institutional Leaders Should Know, authored by Sandy Baum. This report discusses evidence about student borrowing over time to help state and institutional observers understand the facts about student debt and consider policy initiatives that will help students who really need more support. Unfortunately, many of the report's recommendations can be found in our very own proposed solution summaries. Again, we will be emailing you these studies on Friday with our follow-up materials from today's meeting. Now, let's get started with today's meeting. We have great ideas to discuss and debate. Thank you again for sharing all your ideas, your engagement, and your thought leadership. Today's meeting and our next meeting are critical to winnowing down these ideas into recommendations. As a reminder, all ideas submitted will be included in the final body of knowledge that is submitted to Governor Evers for consideration. So if your idea isn't chosen as a final recommendation, there's still opportunity for the governor, for the legislators, and we have great legislators on our very own task force, local governments, institutions, nonprofits, and others to act on your idea. So with that, let's get started, and we'll turn the meeting back over to Michelle. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary. So as indicated for today's agenda, we'll move right into roll call. After this overview, we have two potential solutions to hear about, and we'll have that great deep discussion where we will keep moving forward today, breaking into our discussion groups. So with that highlight said, we will move right into our roll call. Using the chat function. If you're on the phone, please give a shout out, but we will begin with Secretary Blumenfeld. And then in for Derek Campbell, we have Jenny Dye. And then we will have Connie Hutchinson, as indicated, she is here, Laura Sutherland, and Kiona Jones. And if Leah Thomas is here, thank you. Larry Graves. Jeff Brandt. All right, had not seen Jeff in the roll call. We'll check. Brandon Trujillo. Thank you. Rebecca Larson. Rebecca is here. And then in for Jeff Brandt is Julie. Jonuzzi. I hope I got that right. Thank you. Moving on to Representative Ballwig. Thank you. And Representative Hesselbein. Did not see if anyone's in for Representative Hesselbein. Please let us know. Senator Smith. Thank you. And Shannon Halsey.
Here.
Thank you. And Mashoud Akhtar. Kiamani Alford. Thank you. Karen Bauer. And Shannon Conlon. Great. Jody Chung is unable to attend today. Lucy Fenzel. And Renee Gash. And Austin Hammond. And we have Marisha Harris. And Renee Howard Paez. And Sylvie Eisen. Thanks, Sylvie. In for Derek Kindle, I believe we have Shane Maloney. Thanks, Shane. And Paul Kunder. And Kevin McShane. And then Jamie Miller. Not hearing from Jamie yet. Michael Madursky. Michael Rosen. Thank you, Senator, Representative Hesselbein, and Michael Rosen has chimed in as well. And Alex Shade, you replied very early. Thank you, Casey Wachniak. All right, thank you everyone for your quick responses on the chat. We are making good time with that. And we will be moving on to our first presentation now, and I turn the mic back over to the Secretary for introduction.
Thank you very much. And we are very excited to have both Romy Parzik and Brad Pricer here today to talk about employee benefit options for helping employees with student debt. And so let me give a quick introduction. Romy is the CEO of Vault, bringing 2 decades of fintech innovation, operational excellence, and leadership experience to the organization. Her work spans the consumer and commercial finance sectors, where she has worked across organizations to launch new products, drive operational scaling, transform struggling business units, and manage large-scale change initiatives. And Brad is the Director of Benefits for CUNA Mutual Group, bringing a rich and varied professional background to his role. He's a lawyer who's practiced business and contract law, an employee benefits consultant for more than 17 years, and a professional speaker. Brad is recognized as an expert on health and welfare plans and has also provided training on compliance topics such as the Affordable Care Act and HIPAA privacy. So welcome, Romy and Brad. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Romy, you are still on mute. If you could unmute. There you go.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me now?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, great. Just give me 1 second to bring up the presentation. All right. Thank you, Secretary Blumenfeld, and to the entire task force. We're really pleased to be here today and really excited to talk to you about our tool, but more importantly, to bring Brad to the table to be able to give you real life experience about using our platform for his employees and the success he's had thus far. So as you heard, I'm Romy Parzik. I'm the CEO of Vault. We are the first and most trusted student loan platform. We were founded in 2013. I'm here in Austin, Texas, in the scorching, probably 101 degrees weather right now. We have about 1,600 clients on our platform, representing about 2.9 million employees. On the right side here, you'll see some of our logos. And as you heard earlier, CUNA Mutual is one of our really exciting partners who has launched our match program, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Okay, so as a task force, you've heard the story. It's a really incredible crisis with, last year us hitting 1.6 trillion in debt. Within 7 years, we're poised to double that debt. And there's really nothing showing that debt accumulation is going to slow down. What that does for employees is really create a lives on hold experience. So about 70% of graduates in 2019, four-year college graduates, came out with student loans. And so they have, average monthly payments that range very widely, but could be, anywhere into the 500s, with an average student loan debt amount of $37,000. And so what does that do? That means people are really heavily burdened, and they are putting off starting families. They're delaying decisions to buy a house. They're delaying decisions to, buy a car. And they're certainly not able to save for retirement at the pace and at as early as we would like them to. And so what we are finding is that employers, employees, and benefit providers, they're really looking for a solution that's going to help all three parties meet the needs they have. Employees to be able to find a secure future, figure out how to manage their student loans. Employers to be able to attract and retain talent and reduce loss of productivity due to financial stress. And benefit providers like retirement plans who really want to see employees being able to save for their future. So let me tell you a little bit about the market conditions that have, really improved the traction that we've personally had in the market. So first, the number of employers offering student loan benefits is growing. It was quite small in 2017, so only about 4% of employers were offering some kind of debt repayment benefit. In 2019, it doubled, but that's only 8%. And the SHRM study here that shows into the 30% by 2021, that was certainly done before COVID. So it remains to be seen if we're still on pace for that. But you'll see that more and more employers are getting savvy about understanding the needs of their modern workforce. And survey after survey shows that employees rank things like retirement benefits and health plans as sort of table stakes. They expect that. And the next highest demanded benefit is student debt repayment. So in 2018, the IRS put out a private letter ruling. It was for the company Abbott Labs' Freedom to Save program. And what that ruling said was basically that an employer could match into a 401k a non-elected contribution that was based solely on the employee's payments towards their student loans. So we had really pioneered that concept with technology in 2016. And so when 2018, when that private letter ruling came out, that really drove a lot of demand from some of our major retirement plan partners. So let me talk to you a little bit about our platform. We really pride ourselves on what we call being conflict-free. And what that means is that we base our advice on employee outcomes, not on any kind of banking relationships we have. So we pride ourselves on not making money off of refinance, and that we have a holistic solution that helps people get to the right solution for them and their situation. We're not going to, put you on the path to refinance if that doesn't make the most sense for you. We have a very comprehensive suite of student loan assistance benefits, which I'll walk you through. We have 5 top providers that have chosen Vault to be distributors. Those include, huge 401k providers like Voya Financial, Prudential Financial, And then we have direct relationships with retirement plan providers like CUNA Mutual Group. And then we certainly were the first to market with the Match Abbott Labs product. Okay, so we have 3 products. The first one is an advisor product. This is a platform that allows employees to upload all their student loan debt in one place, to have a simple dashboard, and then based on their goals and objectives to really optimize their student loan debt portfolio. Since you all have been learning a lot about student loans, you know that these are very different than something, let's say, like a mortgage, where there's usually one lender, one disbursement date, one interest rate, and one servicer. Unfortunately, the way student loans are managed, it kind of creates a complex portfolio, especially for a young person graduating from school, where you can have 8 to 10 loans dispersed every semester, different interest rates, different servicers. So it can be a challenge. And so it's really important to be able to have a clear picture of all your debt, to understand, what interest rate is due, what your due dates are, and then to make a plan for yourself. So, perhaps you are, you've just graduated during COVID and you've not been able to get a job that helps you pay the amount that's due right away. Well, maybe some kind of income-based repayment program makes the most sense. So, we like to say that we're sort of like a turbo tax for student loan options. And so you can quickly understand which programs you qualify and which ones you don't. And if you don't qualify, why you don't. This is really our most popular product that we sell through employers. Within the advisor product, we also have public service loan forgiveness guidance. So we provide one-on-one family member loan advising. We have counselors that are certified by the National Association of Credit Counselors. They're certified specifically in student loan guidance. And so with our knowledge bank and paired with an advisor, we can help employees understand the risks and benefits of navigating the public service loan forgiveness program. Okay, our next product is our pay product. This is a highly secure payment system that allows employers to pay directly towards student loan payments. So let's say I had just graduated and I joined one of our companies that offers this is MGM Resorts, for instance. So I joined MGM Resorts. They're partnered with Vault. I log into the Vault platform. I enter my information about my student loans. I pick the one that I want to be paid. And then based on my eligibility for the program with MGM Resorts, Vault will move money from MGM directly to my student loan servicer for my student loan account every month. Okay, our last product is our Match product. And this is based on the Abbott private letter ruling that I talked to you about earlier in the presentation. And our role in this product is as a verifier of the student loans, a reporter and tracker of the student loans, and we report that data to the employer and their 401k provider so that they can make the match into the student's 401k plan. And this product, combined with our advisor product, is the one that Brad will talk to you about, which he's implemented for his workforce. Okay, very quickly, I'm just going to talk to you at a high level about some impacts and ROI that we've been able to study. So as you can imagine, healthcare, the healthcare vertical is really important in our business. Even more now, perhaps, with the frontline workers and essential workers dealing with COVID, it's really important to be able to financially support and retain doctors and nurses to the extent possible. And so with one of our programs with Vault Pay, we saw a healthcare system realize a 218% retention. And really, they broke even in 1.1 months. It was just sort of a no-brainer for them. And it's a very, very highly sought after benefit for in this case, it's for nurses. And then last year, we also did a regression analysis with one of our longest standing, I guess they're in the insurance industry, and they showed a 28% improvement in job retention when they controlled for other variables. And we were really impressed with that. And when we look in the marketplace, this 25 to 28% improvement is what we see some of our competitors also reporting in terms of this type of benefit where you're paying for someone's student loans. So I'm going to go ahead and pass the mic over to Brad, and Brad, just let me know. I can click through for you. So let me know the pace you need to go.
Thank you, Romy, and thank you for having me. Good morning. So like most organizations, we have been watching the growing student loan crisis with concern and hearing from our employees of the need for assistance here. And I kind of backed into this a little differently. I got intrigued in this relationship with Vault by the research I was doing on the Abbott Labs private letter ruling and the opportunity that it provided. The partnership with Vault fit in perfectly with our culture. I want to start off with, we're an insurance and wealth management company, and it fits great with our purpose of people helping people. The private letter ruling that related to the Abbott Labs plan really matched what we were seeing from surveys across the nation, and that's especially younger employees would rather be paying off their student loans than putting money aside for retirement. But they felt the need to put that money into the 401k plan in order to not miss out on the employer match in that plan. As Romy just described, this allows individuals to put their money where they would like to, and that is to pay off their student loan faster while still getting that match on the 401k based upon the amount of money that they're paying to their student loan debt. So really it allows them to put their money where they want to and still set aside money to be able to start building that retirement. In talking with Vault, we then looked at the advisor platform, which seemed like the perfect complement to that plan, which allows anyone to, with student loan debt, to potentially consolidate those loans, pay them down faster, or reduce their monthly payments. And a nice part about this too that really gained a lot of appreciation with our staff, was the fact that you don't have to be the one who has a student loan to use the advisor platform and gain the benefits of it. You can invite up to 3 individuals, say your children, who have student loan debt as well. So that was very popular. Romy, if you could move to the next slide. Okay, so lessons learned in this, setting realistic expectations as to what success means. When I pitched this to our executive team, I kept stressing it's not going to be based on the enrollment into this, how many people enroll. There's a bigger picture here. We're working to help a defined set of individuals with a huge need. And based upon the numbers I'm about to show you, I think you'll be able to see what I'm saying. So it's not just enrollment numbers or people on the platform, it's how that this is helping them meet the needs that they have. I also want to stress that you need to do your work up front on this too. So because the 401k plan is involved, you have to amend your plan to do this. We set our Vault Match program up so that individuals at open enrollment opted into the program, at which point they could not defer any compensation into the 401k itself. Again, the match comes based upon the payment that they're making to the student loan. This ensures that there was no double dipping, that people weren't getting a match on their student loan payment, and plus putting money aside into the 401k, which would have run afoul of the PLR. And we also did a lot of modeling, or had our actuaries, I should say, do modeling regarding non-discrimination testing on the 401k. Presumably the individuals who would find the Vault Match program attractive tend to be younger, not your highly compensated individuals. So we have to make sure that with the modeling that we still passed those non-discrimination tests, which we easily could. And then finally, talk to counsel. Make sure that that they're comfortable with how you're setting this up. We followed as much as we could the Abbott Labs private letter ruling to make sure that we were in line with the expectations from that PLR. The differences that we had were slight. For example, our match is different than our 401k match, I should say, is different than that of Abbott Labs. We didn't see that, nor did counsel see that as something of great concern. So just doing your work up front and making sure you're comfortable with the plan that you're putting in place. So what did we learn? This was one of those things. We had a pretty straightforward open enrollment this last year. We're on a calendar year basis, so for 1/1. But this can be a hard program to describe. It ended up being a lot easier than I thought it was going to be. And that's because we were able to rely on the expertise of our partner in Vault. We used their call center to answer all questions, so our HR call center wasn't overly burdened with those calls, and we never received calls back after those calls to Vault with any follow-up questions. It was all taken care of for us. We also did a lot of joint presentations with Vault, where I was live in a room and Vault was calling in, and together we were able to answer all the questions that were brought to us and help explain and identify for individuals if the Vault Match program was right for them, and also how all individuals could be using the advisor platform too. Lessons learned in hindsight, combining this with open enrollment seemed like the right idea because it was opting into a program. But at the same time, this was a large enough rollout that I might have done it off of annual enrollment to give it a little more time for people to dig into it and not have to worry about their healthcare, dental, all those other options that they were looking at the same time. So what does success look like? And if you could move to the next. Here's where we are as of to date on our advisor platform. Now, these numbers, as far as enrollment and usage, may seem small, especially, we have thousands of employees. But again, look at the numbers behind it. We have 229 on the platform of Vault, 131 of whom have uploaded their loan information. And of those 131, there's a total debt of $7.2 million. That I about fell out of my chair when I first saw that. Average of almost $55,000 per employee, average monthly payment of $400 per month. Presumably, these individuals are using the Vault Advisor platform to help consolidate those loans, pay them off faster, or decrease those or decrease that monthly expense. As far as the match program goes, we have 143 enrolled in that program. Again, people opt into that at the beginning of the year. A lot of whom were not making contributions up to the employer match previously into the 401k. So really helping those individuals still put their money where they would like to, which is to pay down that student loan debt faster, while still building up that retirement fund. And as we all know, it's important to start that early. So that's helping there as well. We continue to get positive feedback. People are very appreciative about the program. And We haven't had any complaints about it. We do allow people to disenroll from the program if need be. Say they get a large raise and they now want to be putting money into both the 401k and to pay off their loans. So we allow them to opt out of the program there. But overall, to date, I'd say it's been a very much a successful rollout, and looking forward to increased participation this next year. And Romy, with that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you, Brad. So just quickly, I know we're short on time. What the task force can do is, whatever connections you have at the federal level, any kind of advocating for broader Treasury guidance on the Abbott Labs program beyond private letter rulings would certainly go a long way. Support for the continuation of the CARES Act provision that allows employers to contribute tax-exempt dollars. So currently that provision is set to expire at the end of 2020, and many more employers would be participating in a program like that if that tax-exempt provision were to continue past 2020. And then at the state level, we really think it would be fantastic if everyone that graduated with student loan debt had access to some kind of student loan debt management tool, something like your advisor tool that helps somebody understand the situation that they're facing and make some really good informed decisions. And also possibly consider one-time or ongoing financial contributions to student debt holders, maybe through some kind of grant program or, some other creative way that the task force may come up with. And with that, we will move to questions.
Thank you both very much for your time today and sharing your experience in your product assist student debt holders. So we do have time, a minute or two. If there is a question or two that the task force members have, please remember to put that into the chat box, or you can certainly email that to studentdebttaskforce@dfi.wisconsin.gov, and we have people monitoring that will get the question forward. And again, if we don't have time for all the questions today, we will follow up with both of them afterwards to be sure we're getting any questions you have answered and in that information distributed. So not seeing activity in the chat box, but I'll just pause for a minute here to make sure you have time for typing.
Michelle, there was one question that came in, and it might have been when you got booted off.
Thank you. Yes, I got kicked out.
Love technology. It's from Karen Bauer, and it says, I have questions about cost. How much does an employer pay for each of these services?
Yeah, so really the cost is quite low. It's usually a couple of dollars per employee. Where the costs start to add up is with the actual contributions, as you can imagine. So if you're paying towards someone's student loans, $50, $100, in the case of the nurses, we see up to $450 a month. That's where it really starts to add up. Also, if you're making matches into the 401k, you get a tax advantage there. But the majority of the cost really comes in the actual money that's moving towards helping the employee, not towards the technology.
Yeah, I'll echo that. The cost for the administration of the Vault Match and Advisor is very affordable.
Thank you. We'll take this as our final question, the one that just came in. Would you be able to partner with the state, and if so, how much would that cost?
We would absolutely love to partner with the state, and we are a mission-driven organization. So, we would find the best, most efficient cost that would allow us to help all Wisconsin students manage their student loan debt. Again, like I said, the technology itself is quite affordable. It's very low cost.
Again, thank you both for your time today and sharing your information about the opportunity and your experience with the task force members today. With that, we'll move forward with our agenda and have the secretary introduce our next set of speakers for everyone today.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Romy and Brad, great presentation. And now we'll move to another organization called Savvy. And I'd like to introduce Ari Matuziak and Tobin Van Ostern. So Ari, a Wisconsin native, has extensive background and leadership experience in high growth, venture-backed enterprises, government, and the social impact sector. He's currently the co-founder and CEO of Purpose Venture Group, a strategic advisory firm and venture incubator building for-profit ventures that improve the lives of everyday people and make communities more sustainable, accessible, and resilient. And Tobin is an experienced leader and policy expert. Most recently, Tobin co-founded Savvy, a social impact technology startup in Washington, D.C. that is working to better serve the 46 million student debt loan borrowers by helping them discover new repayment and loan forgiveness options. Savvy works with Fortune 500 companies, membership organizations, and financial institutions to help their employees, members, and customers navigate the complicated landscape of repayment and loan forgiveness options. Welcome, Ari and Tobin, and thank you for being with us today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Secretary Blumenfeld. And it's nice to be with the task force this morning. And even though it's virtual and long distance, it feels like I'm coming back home. As the Secretary said, a Wisconsin native from Glendale, Wisconsin. And really just thrilled to be able to take part in the task force conversation today and the important discussions that you all are having about how best to support Wisconsinites facing student debt. Tobin is going to kick off here. I just want to say a bit by way of introduction that we, with Purpose Venture Group, work with companies of all different shapes and stripes who are really focused on improving the lives of everyday people and communities, as the Secretary said. And the student debt and financial impact, financial hardships facing young people in particular is one of the major issues that we see as holding back economic opportunity and growth in communities across the country. We are very excited about Savvy, who we see as a significant and emerging player in the market, who has the potential to really design solutions that are win-win in their orientation, delivering benefit and value to the end customer ultimately, but also really designed and structured to be delivered in partnership with entities that are, be they corporate, but also public sector, like the state of Wisconsin. And so Tobin is the co-founder, and as the Secretary said, and is going to kick it off. And our goal here is to go through a bit of an overview, which you know about already, given the work that you all are doing, some ideas that we have for how Savvy could partner with the state to really impact positively the Wisconsinites who are struggling with student debt, and then obviously to open it up for questions. So with that, I'll turn it over to Tobin.
Great. Thanks, Ari, and thank you to the task force and Secretary Blumenfeld for inviting us. We're excited to get to talk to you today. Everyone should be able to see my screen at this point. As Ari said, we'll kind of gloss over the broader context here, since you all are experts on this and well aware. But there are a couple points we wanted to mention about the sort of increase of volume of student loan debt that I think is particularly relevant to our focus today. So, one is there's a lot of debt, obviously, but we also know that about a third of people, even pre-COVID, were struggling with affording their payments. I think I got a comment that folks might be having trouble seeing part of the screen. Hold on. Let's see if I can minimize some of these things. Does that help, folks? Let me know if there's any. I saw the chat message, so if anyone's having trouble seeing, just send another chat. And I can move things around. So anyway, a third of people are struggling. And that is despite a wide variety of solutions that the U.S. government has actually put in place to try to prevent this. So, these are programs that myself and Ari worked on in our previous career and previous jobs. For example, one is income-driven repayment programs. So you all are familiar with these programs. Essentially, they're designed to cap your monthly payment at a percentage of your income to make it affordable. Even among the narrow population that gets into those programs, 56% of borrowers miss that annual recertification deadline. So, they get in eventually, 12 months later, they have to recertify. They miss that deadline. They can't fill out the paperwork correctly. They miss the date. Something's lost in the mail. Unfortunately, that pulls them out of the program that's designed to help them, and their payment goes back up. So we know that even though, just using this as an example, there are benefits designed to help people in times of crisis, the uptake rates are low and the utilization rates are low. Let's talk a little bit, though, now about COVID. So specifically, unfortunately, we did a big survey with a partner organization of ours, Student Debt Crisis. They're one of the largest student debt policy and advocacy organizations in the country. And our survey, over 30,000 borrowers, we found that about a third of people aren't aware of any of the special benefits that have been passed designed to help them with student loans. So that includes suspending all federal student loan payments through September 30th of this year. Because of that lack of awareness, we know that, this was a crisis. Things were implemented quickly. People are falling through through gaps. People may not be getting this benefit that should. And so if people aren't aware of the benefit, they have no recourse to realize that they're actually overpaying and should seek help in getting that payment lowered or suspended. We also found this in the survey, not surprising, but unfortunate to see, which is that the number of people struggling with student loan debt is expected to skyrocket significantly. According to our survey, about half of borrowers said that they're going to struggle being able to afford payments once this temporary relief ends. Now, there is a chance that the federal government extends this benefit beyond September. We certainly hope that they do. But regardless, this benefit's going to expire at some point, possibly as soon as October 1st, and a huge portion of borrowers are going to be unable to make that October payment. So, again, you all are familiar with these stats, so I won't spend too much time on this, but I would just note, Wisconsin is unfortunately not unique in this regard. Many states are struggling with student loan debt, many borrowers across the country, and frankly, I wish more states would do what you all are doing, which is set up task forces and specific organizations dedicated to this issue, because frankly, people need help, and the volume of student loan debt is only going to increase over the foreseeable future. So a little bit about us, there was some background on us at the beginning. A couple things I wanted to flag. So we're a registered public benefit company, meaning that helping student loan borrowers is actually at the core of our charter. We were started in 2017 because we could see that this issue was going to need new and innovative solutions. In the last few years, we've had tremendous traction. We've found over $200 million in loan forgiveness through our tool. We've reduced monthly payments on average by about $156 a month, and our average lifetime savings that we find for our users is about $28,000. And I'll talk in a second sort of how we get to each of those numbers. In terms of how we actually roll out our service, though, so we partner with, as mentioned at the top, membership organizations, employers, financial institutions, nonprofit organizations, government entities, pretty big array. You can see some examples here. So, we're proud to work with NEA, the largest teacher union in the country, SEIU, another large service workers union with a number of healthcare workers. On the retirement planning side, we have two great partnerships with TIAA and AIG. They're making Savvy available to folks who they help with retirement, because they can see that if folks aren't able to afford their student loan payment, they're obviously not able to contribute as much to retirement as they could. So we partner with them. We partner with a number of employers. Boston Medical Center is a great example. And then, as I've mentioned, borrower advocacy organizations and other public interest organizations such as Student Debt Crisis. So, today over 10 million people have access to Savvy through our partners. So how does it all work? Well, our whole model, and the reason, our background is in policy. So why did we decide to sort of shift gears a little bit and start this organization? We realized that if we're going to have anything that helps 46 million people, it's going to need to be something that scales. So we wanted to create software that automates as much of this process as possible, and specifically 3 key steps. First, checking your eligibility. Unfortunately, a lot of people aren't even aware of these programs. So they're not aware of a program like public service loan forgiveness that forgives all your debt after 10 years, or teacher loan forgiveness that can help teachers forgive a portion of their debt after 5 years, or income-driven repayment programs that can cap their payments at 10% of their income. So there's reasons for this. Some of these are state programs, some of these are federal programs, some of these are private benefits. And so there's not really a single source for all of this information. So we help with that. Then, even if people are aware, they have to choose. So that teacher, for example, actually has to choose between teacher loan forgiveness and public service loan forgiveness. And that can be a difficult choice, even though they're eligible for each. And then lastly, our solution, like I said, we want it to be as scalable as possible. So we took that TurboTax-esque model, meaning that there's no additional paperwork or anything like that that the borrower has to do. When they're done using the service, we've actually pre-filled all of the government forms for them. They can just digitally sign it and submit it, and they're on their way. And that helps a lot, not just with the initial enrollment, but keeping people in the program. Briefly on COVID, I just wanted to mention we've actually launched, in partnership with Student Debt Crisis, a completely free, lightweight version of our tool, specifically helping people who have lost their jobs or have had their income significantly reduced. This will effectively extend $0 payments for folks for another 12 months. So pretty impactful, and we were excited to be able to get something up, public, and available to folks quickly in need. Through that work and our other partnerships, we're actually already helping. We checked our numbers, over 1,000 student loan borrowers in Wisconsin today. We'd love to expand that, of course, but we've seen great results already from those initial projects. Lastly, before I talk a little bit more about specific partnerships and turn it back over to Ari, just in terms of some Wisconsin-specific numbers related to us. So unfortunately, very few people in Wisconsin are in these income-driven repayment programs. That means that hundreds of thousands of people are potentially overpaying every month on their student loans. That's money that's sent to the Department of Education and Department of Treasury here where we are in DC, instead of staying in Wisconsin, instead of helping people afford other bills during this turbulent time. We'd like to help solve that. So I'm going to turn it over to Ari to talk a little bit about some specific ideas and suggestions we have.
Great. Thanks, Tobin. So we have, we'll quickly walk through 4 tiers of partnership that we've thought through and separately submitted to you all for consideration. Think about them as lightest touch to deepest engagement. So I'll talk about the first 2, Tobin will talk about the second 2, then we'll open it up. So in the first, as Tobin mentioned, Savvy has already partnered with Student Debt Crisis to create this COVID-19 tool. It has a number of sort of endorsers, co-sponsors, if you will, who are already a part of the partnership. It's a free tool. So this would be the first idea would be sort of a promotional partnership where the state of Wisconsin would become an endorser, a promoter of the tool, really as a means of helping to get to distribution to Wisconsinites to make sure they're aware of the tool itself, and as a way for them to access the benefits that may be available to them. The rationale for this, and as well as some of these other ideas, is to Tobin's point, is that really, if someone is facing hardship, they've lost their job, their hours have been reduced, or they were anyway eligible for a lower payment, what is effectively happening is if they do not take advantage of enrollment in an income-driven repayment plan to reduce their payments, they run the risk of, when the federal benefit of the $0, 0% interest runs off, they run the risk of then having their payments go back up, and they might not be able to afford those. But also, if they enroll, they get effectively 12 months. So if they later have come into employment again, or their hours get restored, we hope that's the case, they still get the benefit of the $0 payment or lessened payment as a result of enrolling here. So the way that we like to think about this is that it's effectively another form of federal stimulus that, to the extent that eligible Wisconsinites are not taking it, means that Wisconsin is not receiving the stimulus it is due. So the first is a promotional partnership with the existing tool. The second tier, sort of a step up, if you will, would be a co-branded tool, where it wouldn't have any of the other or sort of endorsers of the COVID-19 tool. And in fact, what the state of Wisconsin would be doing would be co-sponsoring Savvy's full tool. And what we would do here is make available for free for 1 year the ability for all Wisconsinites who are eligible to access the full suite of Savvy's product and tool, give you all access to real-time data reporting, and help to promote the tool through an education campaign. This would be a way to maximize the window of people coming in to the program and to take advantage of the benefits that we've described that people are not taking advantage of. But it would also just be a means of helping people get accustomed to what a process that they should be a part of, i.e., income-driven repayment plans that could be beneficial to them over the life, or eligibility for public service loan forgiveness programs that they that may not know about, that could have significant effect in terms of canceling a material portion of their debt at the end of the 10-year window. Tobin, back to you.
Great. Thanks, Ari. So just briefly, as he said, these are sort of increasing levels of engagement. So the third tier is really focused around state employees. Just briefly, every state employee with student loan debt that is working for full-time or did work full-time probably is accumulating credits towards public service loan forgiveness. So that's a complete forgiveness of student loan debt after a certain number of years. So in the same way that we roll it out with other employers like Boston Medical Center, et cetera, we'd love to roll it out with you all as an employer and really focus on maximizing that forgiveness. And then the last tier are a couple different ideas, all of which would require further exploration. But just to give you a sense of what's possible and what we're talking about in other locations around the country is sort of 4 quick things. We could integrate, use that word broadly, with your unemployment insurance mechanism. So it could be as simple as a notification, or it could be as in-depth as an automated integration. But the idea is if people are filing for unemployment insurance, that's a great time to make sure that they're enrolling in IDR and extending that runway for 12 months. Dynamic audit tool. So as I mentioned, a lot of folks don't know what their benefits are under the CARES Act. This tool basically checks them automatically and helps them understand if they did get those benefits. Consumer reporting. There's lots of individual issues people run into. Since we work with tens of thousands of borrowers in any partnership, we could streamline the reporting there to make sure the relevant state agencies and policymakers have their finger on the pulse of what's happening with individual borrowers. And then lastly, targeted surveys. I think that this could help, again, keep a sense of what's happening now. Things are changing rapidly. More legislation is possible, and allow you all to stay nimble in dealing with this issue. So that's our brief presentation. Let me pause there. I put up my email. I know there's a couple different ways you all can submit questions, but happy to spend a few minutes on questions now as well.
Thank you, Ari and Tobin, for that overview and those possibilities for Wisconsin. We do have a few questions that have come in, and the first one, I'm gonna give you the first two together. How much does this cost per borrower? But then the next one is, could you talk about how well the platform works for those with low levels of computer or financial literacy, or simply difficulties navigating complex information?
Absolutely. Ari, I'm happy to take these. So first on the cost front, as Ari mentioned, we are just trying to help people in particular during this time of crisis, and we have a free option available. We'd love to partner with you really around promotion and distribution. So there would be no cost to you, no cost to the borrower for that first tier that he referenced. As you get to the higher tiers, there are costs associated with that, and it sort of depends on specifically what you're looking for. But one unique thing I'd flag about our software is whenever we do a partnership, folks can always get all the way through a results page see what their savings is before any cost is incurred, whether to them or to their employer or partnering entities. So that means that if folks go through it and they just find out, oh, there's no savings, or I'm on the right track, or whatever, there's no charge. It's really only if you get through that and you say, all right, I found savings and I want your help with getting into the program, filling out the paperwork, that's when the fee would be incurred. And then on the second piece, it is fully mobile accessible. So it is, and we have different tiers of phone-based support as well. So there's a couple options for people, whether they're on a computer, whether they're mobile only or phone only, in terms of how they can interface with our system.
A follow-up to that really is considering borrowers with no access to broadband access and could benefit by using the tool. Are there options available to assist them and offer the same benefits? I don't know if you can expand further on those two options you just presented.
Yeah, I would really, so we know that a lot of folks who don't have broadband access, they're actually disproportionately more likely to have smartphones. There's lots of really interesting research about this. So you do tend to actually do pretty well across both. But with that said, just to flag, we do have a call center and we do have savvy experts internally. So for folks who want a phone only option, no broadband internet required, they could always call into that service.
Thank you. And we'll probably take this potentially as our last question, depending upon the response, but there's an increasing number of graduates working as independent contractors in the gig economy. And based on your experience, do you have any recommendations on how to better serve individuals outside the traditional employment market?
Yeah, Ari, would you like to take that or do you want me
to? Sure. So I think the point here is they're really sort of two. I think this actually comes back to why we think a partnership with the state is so important, because Savvy has traditionally to date been achieving distribution through employers, and that has a tremendous upside benefit for the employees of those enterprises. There are a lot of enterprises that sort of need the help, and that's a viable pathway. And lots of employers, inclusive of the state of Wisconsin, for example. But you're right, for independent contractors, they don't have a natural home to an HR office, for example, that's giving them ready-made information. And so there, we do see some opportunities, for example, partnering with some of those, however you would describe them, those sort of gig economy enterprises, and helping them push information down to the gig workers. But at the end, we think partnership with government and trusted counterparties that can communicate information to people in a state becomes very important. So if the state of Wisconsin becomes, and this is really what's behind this, if the state of Wisconsin becomes a co-sponsor of a co-branded tool that is being widely disseminated, and we are being intentional about the education and marketing with respect to that, our belief is that we will get to a much broader cross-section of the state, and frankly get to those who are sort of less served by sponsoring entities or employers because they have a different employment situation. And that's incredibly important now, given the fact that there's such a large cohort of people who are unfortunately unemployed. And that's where Tobin talked a bit about potential partnerships with unemployment insurance offices, et cetera, as another way to just think about as many levers as possible to get to the end user who is in need and has a benefit that is available to them that they may not be utilizing as possible.
Thank you for that response and for the information again, Ari and Tobin. We really appreciate it. I know the discussion groups will be talking about this further. And with that, we will move to our break and gather back here at 10:10. But please know, Ari and Tobin, that we really appreciate your time. We do have some additional questions coming in that we'll circle back with you to get answers on as well. So thank you again. And everyone, We'll see you back here at 11:10. This is just a 1-minute warning, but we'll be coming back from break in 1 minute. Welcome back, everyone. If everyone could take their seats, we'll continue on with our meeting. And we will move forward with handing the microphone back over to the chair, Secretary Blumenfeld.
Great, thank you, Michelle, and thanks to all the wonderful presenters. That was very informative and very interesting and good information for our task force. So now we will move on to the fun part of I guess the very exciting part of our task force. And I just want to spend a minute talking about what we're going to do when we break out into our subgroups, our work groups, as we enter in the winnowing down process. So as I mentioned earlier, we had 37 proposed solutions to consider. And again, a thank you to all that spent a lot of time and effort thinking about this and putting together really thoughtful proposals for our consideration. We bucketed those proposals the best we could. And I think I mentioned a few times before that it's not a perfect system because many of the proposals kind of could span all three groups. So we made the best call that we could in terms of putting them into a particular work group so that we could do a deeper dive and consider them in the smaller work groups. And so each of us will break into those work groups again. We will, first off, you'll see there's a little new sign next to some of them. So we'll briefly cover the new ones that came in since our last task force meeting and have a brief discussion on each of those. And then we'll go into a kind of narrowing down the solution sets, and we'll go through, it'll look a little bit different in each of the groups. In particular, consumer protection only ended up with like 2 buckets of options. So they may take a little different path with Lara Sutherland as the facilitator there. But our goal here, our end goal here is really to come up with 2 recommendations from each subgroup that then in our next meeting we'll consider as a whole. So let's go to the next slide and just look at our little timeline and process here. So we are in meeting 6. It's hard to believe time has flown so quickly through this this task group. And so today you'll see, hopefully you've had a chance to look at a minimum the proposal solutions that were recommended in your particular work group, and that you've been able to use your little worksheet if that was helpful. And I'll just remind you that you know, those worksheets are really for your own review, so you don't need to send those in or hand them in, but they're handy in terms of thinking about what's most important in each group and what they're aimed to do. Are they aimed at, you know, a student that is entering school? Is it aimed at someone that's in school? Is it going to help them afterwards in terms of reducing debt? Does it help with our more vulnerable communities? Does it make it easier to borrow, you know, to manage your borrowing? So all those considerations that really were derived out of the executive order that Governor Evers gave us. So again, it's a worksheet that you can use, you can take notes on, continue to take notes on, But to help you as we get into kind of the voting and prioritization process, notes that can help you inform you of where you want to focus the recommendations. So that is today. Our goal is to each work group come up with 2 recommendations that in meeting 7, we will consider those 6 recommendations, 2 from each work group. And we'll spend time on each of the 6 work groups. And in between, each of the facilitators, so Executive Secretary Hutchinson, who's leading the first group on borrower education and management of higher education worksheets, she will take the discussion and take the 2 items that arise out of the discussion and synthesize that into 2 discrete recommendations that we will consider in meeting 7. Laura Sutherland will do the same for the consumer protection, and I will do the government, public, and private institution subsidies. So we will send that out ahead of time. We will have discussion around them, so they'll be very draft, and in meeting 7, we can certainly amend those or strengthen them or do what we need to do during meeting 7. Post meeting 7, we will take those recommendations and make them and update them and send you prior to meeting 8 a draft of the final report with those 6 recommendations. And I will remind you again that all 37 recommendations will be included in the body of work, the final report. The ones that don't make it to the final 6 will be in the appendix, but they will all be contained in one body of knowledge that, again, we will have the top 6 that we recommend to Governor Evers, but anyone can really pick up the different proposals and ideas and implement them in a way, and hopefully we've created a lot of solutions that really can be applied in multiple different ways. So meeting 8 will be our last meeting, and that is when we will make any updates to the final report and draw a conclusion to this task force. Not seeing any unforeseen obstacles in the way, but that is at least our best laid plan at the moment. So with that, I'm just going to pause. Your facilitators, when you get into your work groups, will recover the process that they're going to use. We're all pretty similar. I will mention that we have bucketed the proposals that are similar. So, for example, we got multiple proposals that looked at refinancing. So instead of diluting votes with 4 proposals, we've bucketed those together. So when we actually do the voting process, we will be voting on the topic level. And we like to think of it as the what, not the how. So more of our discussion is going to focus on what we are going to recommend than the very specific details of the how, because that will come later as these proposals get ferreted out. I was thinking back originally to the first recommendation in the governor's first budget, which talked about just one of the proposals, which was a refinancing authority. And if our whole task force, all 8 meetings were devoted to just figuring out the details of how to implement a refinancing authority, we would be very detailed in what and how that looked like. But we have a very broad charge in our task force, as evidenced by 37 proposals. So we are going to focus more at the what our recommendations are, with a little bit of the how, because I think the how is important. But when we get down in the weeds of the how, that's where your facilitators are going to try and bring you back up to really focus on the what for the day. So with that, I'm going to pause. Michelle, if I've forgotten anything process-wise, please keep me honest and correct me. But that is how I see our future. We see our future for the next 3 meetings. Any questions on process? All right, I am not seeing any of those, so I'll hand it back to you, Michelle.
Great. Thank you very much, Secretary. And this slide just reminds everybody of our next meeting that was just previewed for you. So meeting 7 will take place on August 5th from 10 to 1 in our wonderful WebEx room here that we have. And just a reminder, if you need anything or have any contacts, questions, please reach out to the Student Debt Task Force at dfi.wisconsin.gov. If you are a general public member monitoring these meetings, that email address is available for you as well. And then any logistical items regarding the meetings themselves, please feel free to reach out to me and provide that feedback so we can continuously improve. And with that, I'm going to move to the next slide, which reminds everybody what group they've been doing, but their homework should be assisting them with that in the proposed solutions that they've been reviewing in preparation. And we will take this time to move to our breakout rooms. You would have been sent a link. Those links are also being put in the chat box here, and I'll move to the next slide that shows those links as well. Please move to your discussion group over the course of the next couple minutes, and everyone will get started by 11:22 if everyone's there. That's our goal. So with that, have a great discussion. The full task force will be adjourned from those discussion groups. And if you are in this main meeting room, please do not leave this WebEx meeting. But if you need to go to the other discussion group rooms, please be sure you leave this meeting, use the link to enter the other meeting so you don't have any interference with that. So thank you again for your participation today, and we'll see you in discussion rooms.
Kathy, we can see the presenter view if you could swap it. Awesome, thank you.
Cody, if you want to call up the slides, that would be great. Sorry, I think I was on mute. I'm not going to drive. I'm not a good driver. So thanks for bearing with me here. So let me try this again. Let's see. Okay. Now I think I am seeing what I need to see. All right. Okay. So why don't you just take your phone off mute and say you're here if you are here, and we'll go from there. So Julie?
Here.
Jenny Dye?
Here.
Great. Shannon? I think I saw Shannon's thing. Derek? And that might be Shane.
Oh, yep, that's me.
Okay, great. Paul?
Here.
Great. Rebecca?
Here.
Mike?
Here.
And Michael Rosen?
Here.
And Alex Shade?
Here.
Great, perfect. Okay, very good. Let's go to the next slide. And what we have here are the different proposals that are in our bucket, if you will. And you'll see that the ones, there's, I think, 8 that have new. What I'd like to do first is just kind of walk through those quickly and have discussion around those, what they are, so that we know what they, involve. And then if you forward to the next slide, I just want to give you a preview of how we've bucketed these, so you can be thinking about that as we're going to do a poll and have you each pick your top 2 buckets that you would want us to focus on moving forward to the final report. So we've bucketed them into loan forgiveness, promise programs, refinancing, targeted aid, and tax credits. And so we've done the best we can. We might decide for some reason that we want to move them around. We'll have this slide up for you when we do our kind of polling. But before we get to that, I just want to cover the newer ones that have come in for a little bit of discussion. And again, you might want to have your worksheet handy with you to either look at your notes or take notes on to help you. But our ask will be that you pick 2 of the buckets for us to focus on. Once we have those 2 buckets, then we'll look inside of them and kind of decide how we want to promote those forward. And then I'll take that information and put a draft proposal recommendation for us for the next meeting. So does that sound okay? Are there any questions before we get started on the process? I'm just looking here to see. Great. Thanks, Catherine, for putting that in writing. So let's go back a slide, Cody, and talk about the newer ones that have come in. And if you're an author of one, I will ask you to kind of just describe a little bit about those. And if not, you will have we can look at the different proposals if you have them handy and just talk through them quickly. So the first one came from Andy Gronick, who has devoted a lot of time and energy to student debt. He has a website. There's a video also that there's a link in the proposal summary. But basically, his recommendation is a way to recruit and retain young graduates by helping them pay back student loans. So it's hard to think back, but pre-COVID, there was an incredible focus on workforce shortage in our state. And obviously with COVID, that focus has been, quite a bit different lately. But his proposal really incents students to stay and work in the state by offering them tax credits for staying and working in our state, so retaining that talent, And instead of having to pay state taxes, having those those dollars really directed to pay down their student debt. So for someone thinking about maybe a job here in Wisconsin, a job in Tennessee, it might, you know, tip the scale for them staying in our state, so retaining that talent by knowing that some of their state taxes would actually help them repay their debt. The next new one is the College Promise Program. So Michael Rosen, if you just want to talk a little bit about your proposal for Promise programs, that would be great, maybe 2 minutes or so. But Michael, you're on mute. Let's see. Okay, let's see if we can hear you now.
No. Okay, can you hear me?
Yep. Now we can hear you. Thank you. And
Okay.
Cody, you can take down the slide during this, during Michael's talk.
So I described 3 different kinds of promise programs. One is the last dollar, which is the most common that's in this state, run by a number of different institutions, including the MATC, the one I'm most familiar with. And that is that it covers only the cost of tuition and uses federal financial aid and Wisconsin grants and first, and then only if a student still doesn't get enough from those sources, then there's the promise or private funding comes into play. The problem with those programs is that the cost of attendance is so much greater than just tuition, and therefore books, housing, transportation, food, I could go on, are not covered. So a second program is what I call a middle dollar, where you have basically a stipend of $1,000 on top of whatever the promise covers. So you'd have you could do last dollar and then make sure that tuition's covered, and then provide additional $1,000. And then the other kind of program is a first dollar program, which is really where tuition is paid for by the state or by is covered. Tuition is free, in other words, and then the federal Pell Grants and other things are used to cover other costs of college. I don't make a specific recommendation about, I mean, obviously the third one from my experience would be very much more preferable. That is the first dollar program. So I'll leave it at that. I think I'm glad you coupled the promise programs together, because I think that was appropriate.
Okay. Thank you, Michael. Any questions for Michael at this point?
Let me just say one other thing. Based at MATC, where we've done the last dollar program, when it's been a serious problem. I mean, obviously it's still a benefit, but it's been a serious problem when students come in and they say, well, we thought it was free, and then they get a book bill of $1,000, or they have to make a choice between buying books and feeding their kids. Most of the students at Milwaukee Area Technical College are adults, and many of them are single mothers. And so that's the limitation to the last dollar program that covers tuition only, and why I would be a strong advocate for first dollar, or if we didn't want to go that far, the middle dollar program.
And is it fair to say, Michael, that there are promise programs in the state, but they're not at the state level, they're at the institution level?
Exactly. They're all at, I mean, many of the institutions have them. Many of the technical colleges have them. And Madison, UW-Madison has, I think, a variation of it. I forgot what it's called, Badger. I don't know if there's anybody.
Bucky's Promise.
Bucky's Tuition Promise. Yep.
Bucky Tuition Promise. But again, well, I've said what the limitations to those are. One other advantage, just in contrast to some of these, is that this program doesn't just deal with student debt at the back end when students have the debt. It tries to help alleviate it at the front end before students accrue the debt. And it seems to me that that is an important part of our mission.
Very good. Thank you, Michael. The next new one is state income tax credits. And this was just a quick look at a few states, Maryland, Maine, and Minnesota, that have offered state income tax credits to eligible borrowers. And their programs look different. Some offer up to a $500 reduction in their state taxes based on their student debt repayments. Others can have refundable credits up to $5,000. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at a few different states' programs. There are definitely advantages and disadvantages to both. It can be very costly. It can, on the disadvantage side, it can be costly to state revenue and might not target the most vulnerable people. And on the advantage side, it could help retain, people. It could be an incentive for people to stay, kind of like the Badger Clawback a little bit, to stay in Wisconsin, and would obviously help accelerate the repayment of student debt. The next new one is number 8, state refinancing of private student loans. And that's another Michael Rosen one. So Michael, I'll ask you to comment on that one.
Hold on a minute. So we've had some discussion about refinancing student loans, and it seems to me that would be a valuable thing to do, particularly for students who have taken out loans at higher rates. One of the concerns that I have, based on the discussion that we had last time, is that there was some discussion about the robust private market for refinancing student loans. I'm concerned that if you don't have one big pool, you risk the problem of adverse selection. That is, if the private market is essentially targeting low risk student loan people and covering them, and what we heard was from rates of 2 to 4.5%, but it's not covering higher risk people, which are disproportionately low income and students of color, and you don't have them all in one pool, which is the difference, I think, in this proposal and others, then you end up making it almost impossible to service the higher risk people. So this is a proposal that there would be some kind of entity established that would ensure that all students that want to refinance are covered.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Michael. And I will mention, when we think ahead to the buckets, we had a few different refinancing proposals. So
right.
If that makes it to the next level, we'll have a robust discussion on it. It'll be good. The next new one is strategic use of state grant aid to reduce student loan challenges. And that was put forth by Kevin McShane, who is not in our work group, but hopefully you've had a chance to look at it. And we've grouped it also with number 13, which are both are targeted ways to use grant money and financial aid money. So I think they complement each other. Kevin comes up with 4 different ways in which state grants could be offered. One is around kind of making sure that there's a small grant applied to loan repayment when you both work with a student loan advocate at your institution, and making sure that you are working through and educating yourself on financial literacy. So really encouraging people to understand and take control of their financing, and incenting that with a small grant towards repayment. The Wisconsin Emergency Grant is another grant that we've seen very helpful and proven that oftentimes people don't get to completion at their in their schooling because their car breaks down, or they get sick, or they have a $500 or less expenditure that makes it impossible for them to complete, and they end up dropping out of their program. So emergency grants have been very helpful in targeting people that are going through distress and helping them through that rough patch. There is a whole other recommendation in another subgroup on emergency grants. And then the Wisconsin Credential Completion Grant is a third one that really incents people to be able to finish their credentials. And the fourth being a balance forgiveness grant, which we heard several times come up that when people come back, they have dropped out and come back to return to their studies, and if they owe a past due balance, that they're not able to either get their transcripts or to get back in, and helping with some forgiveness of that prior debt with the incentive of being able to actually come back and complete the program. So very targeted use and targeted aid is in this particular proposal. The next new one is in student debt employee benefits, and we just heard there's multiple ways in which this can be exercised. One would be offering, as we saw in the earlier presentation, incentivizing companies that are helping, like we saw with Vault and CUNY Mutual, incentivizing companies that are offering help to their employees with student debt. Then that can be done through tax credits. But this can also be a program like we saw with Savvy that can be targeted to state employees to help them with their student debt. There's multiple ways in which the employee, thinking of student debt as an employee benefit, can be executed. And this is one I think that has even broader implications than just our task force and what the state can do, because there are a lot of organizations that are realizing that by offering help with student debt, it's very much a talent attraction tool for employers. So so again, this one can manifest itself in multiple different ways. The next new one is Paul, if you could take that, student loan refinance interest rate subsidies. So again, we group this in the refinancing option, and thank you for taking this one on.
Thanks. Yeah, the concept here is actually very similar in problem definition to what Michael Rosen was just observing in his proposal, and that's that at the time a lot of the state lending authorities were established, the marketplace wasn't very efficient in providing private capital to refinance student loans. Over the decade, that has changed, and you have now private lenders basically refinancing prime borrowers at competitive rates. And the observation I've had in looking at what we've been shown with some of the existing state authorities is that the rates are really not much better, if not the same, with the state authorities. But the group of borrowers that's unserved by all those current solutions are those that have don't have prime credit. And so they're not able to reduce their interest rates. And as I mentioned, most of them have smaller balance amounts too, which is thought to be reflective of the lack of completion of their degree program. So my concept here is just to suggest that state resources be used to focus on that group that needs the help the most, which are those without prime credit. But to do that, it's going to require a subsidy because the the credit losses would be higher, you would assume, empirically with that group. So that's the concept here, is focusing on that group of borrowers that need the most help, and then doing so through partnering with the private lenders that are already in the marketplace.
Great. Any questions for Paul on that? If not, we'll move to the last one, which is new, which is Rebecca Larson, and it's support increase in state-based student financial aid, a Wisconsin grant.
Yeah, thank you. So this is a joint submission from the University of Wisconsin System, Technical College System, and the Association of Independent Colleges and Universities. And it supports an increase in Wisconsin grants, which are needs-based student aid that provide grant assistance to undergraduate students in all sectors, all of those sectors, and also including tribal colleges. And our sectors have worked collaboratively on an attainment goal called 60 Forward, where we want to achieve 60% of the state's population to have a credential by 2027. And one of our main strategies on getting there is to support low-income and underrepresented students to obtain a post-secondary credential. And so what we're suggesting is to have an increase in the Wisconsin grants appropriations for all sectors. We tend to lag behind the nation. We're kind of in the middle of the pack in terms of our investment in needs-based aid at the state level. And also we tend to lag behind our neighboring states, particularly in Minnesota. They have their appropriation is double the amount that we have in Wisconsin. So we wanted to just have some support for Wisconsin grants, proposal in support of increasing Wisconsin grants. And also at the national level, just to mention, there's been a similar discussion of, particularly with the pandemic, of doubling the size of the Pell Grant to support students whose financial situations may have changed because of the pandemic. So this is sort of a similar focus here in Wisconsin.
Thank you, Rebecca. Questions for Rebecca? Okay, and this would be thinking about this system is already in place, correct? So it wouldn't be creating a new system. It would be just adding more money. When we heard Connie, Executive Secretary Connie Hutchinson speak about HEAB and the work that they do, it would just, and she talked about, the money runs out really quickly and, there's much more need than there are funds. It really gets at increasing those kind of targeted grants, or am I interpreting that not correctly?
No, that's exactly right. And it gets to the sort of front end of a front end solution where we can reduce the amount of debt that a student has to take out by giving more grant aid at the front end. So yeah, so it would increase those existing appropriations.
Very good. Okay, so now we've at least covered in some way the 14 different proposals that are in our bucket here. Let's just move to the next slide, and Cody, if you advance, there we go. And you can see, I'll just walk through the buckets. So Loan forgiveness programs we talked about last time, and that was really, targeting specific. There are a few that exist in the state for minority teachers and some healthcare areas where really incentivizing programs for people to go into high need jobs with some semblance of loan forgiveness. So that's one bucket. We heard last meeting and this meeting about the promise programs. So we've bucketed those two proposals together. There were 4 related to refinancing authorities. So we heard from Michael and Paul today of different ways in which we might approach that. The first one really targets just more private loans, similar to Michael's. And the third one, student loan refinancing authorities, is really just an overview of some of the existing refinancing authorities that are in other states. And we obviously heard from Treasurer Magaziner earlier in Rhode Island, which probably has the most mature refinancing authority. So we've bucketed those together in refinancing offerings. The next one is targeted aid, and we just heard from Rebecca and talked about Kevin's proposal as well. As last time we touched upon also targeted aid for former foster youth, and in that recommendation we see that foster children, former foster youth, have both a very low completion enrollment and completion rates, as well as are often in need of support along the way through their education journey. And then the last was really 4 proposals that relate to some type of tax credit. We heard about the Badger Claw program. In Kansas, there's a paper on the rural opportunity zones where they gave tax credits for people that moved to rural areas. I think it had some mixed results in terms of whether or not those, that their measures of success were achieved. We looked at, I think, Minnesota and Maryland in terms of state income tax credits. And then the last one being, and my controls are right over that one. So let me just get the name here so I read it right. Student debt employee benefits, sorry. So that an offering could be to incentivize employers with a tax credit to do what we saw with Vault and Savvy, and really rewarding employers for helping their students or their employees, rewarding employers for helping employees pay down their student debt. So those are the buckets. I'm just gonna pause and then open it up for questions, discussion. We'll entertain questions and kind of group source the answers, because you're all experts as well. And so if someone has a particular answer to a question, feel free to jump in. If we were sitting around, just picture us sitting around a table and talking about these, and then we'll move into the polling question and the polling opportunity to narrow these buckets down to 2, and you'll have 2 votes. So be thinking about which 2 things that you want to move forward. So I'll pause here and see what kind of questions they have. And Catherine, if there are questions that came in, because I haven't been watching the chat super closely while I've been talking, do let us know.
Can I jump in, Secretary Blumenfeld?
You bet.
Great. I just wanted to make a comment on one of the proposals. I don't know when is appropriate, so I thought maybe I could now, which is the tuition remission for former foster youth. And we sort of tracked that proposal when it went through the legislature, and we serve on the DCF former foster youth to college advisory council. And during the discussion, when it was going through the legislature, there was talk about, because this program applies to public institutions, but there was talk about also including, former foster youth that might want to attend a private nonprofit institution, and perhaps it could be viewed as a grant program. And, we think of it as, perhaps there's, a young girl who might have experienced trauma and would want to attend a women's college or something like that. So there was a discussion of just expanding that. So I just wanted to share that for purposes of the discussion. I know this particular proposal was targeted at public institutions, but perhaps it could be expanded going forward.
Very good. We'll note that for sure. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thanks.
Other questions, comments? Don't be shy. It's just us. Paul.
Yeah, Kathy, I was wondering if you could, one of the questions in my mind in looking at these is there's obviously a significant range of potential state budget costs in supporting these. And so when I look at them myself, I think I might be attracted to one of them, but then I think, well, could that ever be politically achieved? And so, my mind may come back to things that I think could be done, but aren't nearly as impactful. And so I was wondering if you'd help us as a group figure out how to, maybe I'm the only one in need of help with that, but as a group, if you just share how you think how we should be thinking about that in this process.
Sure, it's an excellent question, and something that's top of mind for me and probably all of you is, what can be done? And I think if you look at your worksheet, when you think about lift, I think that's what we were also trying to get at. Some of these range from, pretty easy because the infrastructure is there today, and some are both expensive and require building a huge infrastructure. And so I would consider those the high lift versus the small lift. So I think as we decide on the what in the terms of narrowing these down to two, our follow-on discussion for writing the proposal, I think that's where we are going to have to kind of talk about how we have this recommendation in a way that is practical, or most practical, I'll say. It doesn't have to be purely practical, because to be purely practical, I'd say we might be watering it down so much it might not have impact. But it's up to us to figure out where that inflection point of is both can be done and is implementable, if you will. So I see it as first step is we're going to narrow, and then we're going to discuss how to create the recommendation that we feel comfortable with going forward. And I recognize that that's not pure because, again, pick refinancing, for example. There's multiple ways that could be a huge lift all the way to a more, manageable one. I just think the first winnowing process, we've got to figure out which two things we're going to focus on and then build those out. So it's not a pure process, I recognize, but we don't live in a very pure world either. So I don't know if that's helpful, right, or if anyone else would like to add to that or comment on it. I see Mike. I'm calling you Mike. Is that okay? Since we
no, that's totally fine. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. And
absolutely.
And Michael Rosen, I'm calling Michael just for ease. Okay, thank you.
That's fair. Paul, that's a great question because I had kind of the same thing. Kathy, can I just, maybe this is a little more point of clarification, because there's definitely some things on the list, trying to narrow it down to two big groups and trying to get something done, I think is important. And when we put the proposals together, and I understand all of them are going to go to the governor, but are there certain things, like if we pick, just for whatever, we pick the two groups, but there's something in groups 3, 4, and 5 that we really want to, hey, we really should look at, and that should just get done. Is that going to be part of the proposal? What are people's thoughts about that? because there's some things on here that, that are already in place, and we just have to allocate more resources to it, or more dollars, which might be the easy lift, but maybe not be may not have the largest impact to the whole issue. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, I can kind of try to explain. But can you kind of maybe comment on how you feel, how the rest of the things that aren't in the top two kind of get pushed through, or not pushed through, but at least highlighted?
Can I add to that before you answer, actually? Because I want to
Sure.
add to the question. So I don't know if it's the right time to add new ideas to this, but I'm looking at like the promise programs and the targeted aid. So I'm wondering if there's an opportunity to kind of creatively combine those and maybe not create a promise program for everybody in the state, but maybe look at a targeted group of students, perhaps the former foster youth, and create a promise program for them that is maybe a last dollar or a first dollar. And kind of, I just don't know if that's too broad of a proposal to submit forward. Kind of similar to Mike's point on that.
I will let Mike and others react to that. I'm open to it. Again, we did the best job that we could in a short amount of time. So I am, if those feel like they are, one and the same, and both targeting, the right people, let's have a discussion around it. That's what our discussion, that's exactly what this is for. I will say there are 3 things that we pulled out that will be in the final report that aren't necessarily voted on. I mentioned this last time too, that we had advocacy. So at both the state, the federal level is going to be, separate data. So anything that we recommend, we want to also make sure that we have the opportunity to collect data and look at the data that we do have around it to inform the program. And the third is really disparate impact and making sure that what we do, because that's a big part of our charge, is really targeting vulnerable communities. So all of those things should be, should kind of flow through all 6 of the recommendations that we have. So I'll pause there though, but I'm very interested in your thoughts.
Hey, Kathy, can everyone hear me okay?
Yes, Alex. I think Alex, and then I saw Paul's hand go up, and we'll go from there.
So I'm going to circle back to something that Paul had said. So Paul, to answer your question, you're not the only person that was thinking and had that same logic when looking at for what we know that's happening right now at the statewide level, how much is budget going to impact and address some of the recommendations that we are looking at. And so for me, when I was going through, and full candor, when asked to rank each of the 14, I had ranges of like 1 to 3, 4 to 6, 7 to 9 as okay, let's go in and debate, right? And I had in that mindset of, yes, okay, low cost option to the other end of the spectrum, which is going to be a high cost option. But then I also kept very much top of mind 2 things. One, the actual charge that we were, that was set before us as a task force to be looking at, as you said, Kathy, those 3 things to be uplifting, but the ones that for me have been guiding throughout this whole process is, of course, looking at tech, right? I know there was a couple of mentions related to data and gathering various data points, but I think about this as a opportunity for additional investment in tech resources, whether that's coming in the space related to the Borrow the Wisconsinites, and we saw that in that space of the presentation today, as well as earlier presentations. And one of my questions didn't get asked, which was like, yeah, but what other states are doing this, right? Are there models for being able to provide a free online resource to everyone in this state? And that's a key test that was outlined for us. The other ones were, of course, in relationship to strategies aimed at those vulnerable populations. So whether that is individuals that we identify and that are self-identified as women, individuals of color, low income, first generation, it's that equity piece, racial, socioeconomic. We've heard that consistently, right, in every single meeting. And then the other one that drove my ranking system was looking at the actual and I'm glad it got bucketed, which was the refinancing options, the various refinancing options in this space of where I also looked at this as how great would it be as a part of that BHAG, right? That big, hairy, audacious goal. And so I think when we go further into these conversations, we need to keep top of mind what we were asked to do, what we were tasked to do. And then also, I really want to know where people were landing, right? Like I want to kind of follow the rules that were outlined by us, which was to rank and to figure out where were people's 1, 2, 3s, and maybe 4 and 5. Just you were like, I don't know, I want to make it maybe a 1, 2, or 3, but it's falling a little bit further, because I think we could then eliminate some of these in order to get to that 2 or 2 plus 2.25, 2.5.
Great. Well, and I'll just interject before Paul real quick and just answer one of those. On the tech side, so looking at Vault and Savvy and the ones that we had today, I feel like those solutions actually fell in a different work group. So that would be consumer protection. So thinking they really were bucketed down to like privacy, I think it was, and consumer. So it was consumer protection. I'm sorry, I'll say this right. Borrower Bill of Rights and loan ombudsman. So if the state were to have a loan ombudsman or department focusing on helping Wisconsinites with student debt, I think they might employ some of those technology strategies or those partnership strategies. So while that is a very viable option, I just think it didn't land in our work group as well. And then to get at your sharing of prioritization, I think that's where the polling will come, we'll be able to share through our polling. But before we get there, I want to have more discussion because this is really awesome. So Paul, I think you were next. And then if you raise your hand, does everyone have if it's easy to turn your cameras on, if you're able to, it's just easier to see your help. So I see Paul, Rebecca, and then Michael in that order. And if anyone else, you could chat in or let us know other ways as well. So Paul, and then Rebecca, and then Michael.
Yeah, I just wanted to react to what Shane said, which is kind of hit squarely at where my conflict is, and Mike's comments as well. I feel like the state refinancing might be, there are pathways you can see to accomplish that because it's been done in other states, but at the same time, from information that we were presented in an earlier meeting and that I summarized in my proposal, the average person is estimated to save $7 a month. And we all think about it in the context of a home mortgage where the balance is $280,000 and you're going to drop an interest rate. When you drop 3% on $9,000, it doesn't solve a problem if you, for most people. And then that proposal also, the state refinancing proposal also, as it's been done in other states, most of the benefits go to the upper income quartiles because the larger the loan is, the more the savings is. So, I'm personally, all these are great proposals, but the two that really, to me, I hope can get more discussion are the strategic use of resources to help targeted those who are vulnerable and to move people to completion and give them the aid they need to make sure they have an income that's able to support the debt that they incurred to get that. And then the promise, the targeted promise thing, to me is such a need because it does address the equity issues and the economic issues that families face in having a pathway to a better life. But my thought, Kathy, is I don't see how we could, as a task force, not discuss the student loan refinancing issue because one, it's already been in the, it's already been out there and it's part of the conversation. So to me, I don't see how we leave it behind, even if the savings could be, you know, as we have summarized them, would be less dramatic, less impactful than some of these other proposals. So I guess Shane asked, can we have more, since you're moderating our group, could we bend the rules and do 3? Or should it have the refinancing then been one that automatically has to be in the mix just because of how it's already been discussed? It's already out there. That's a lot. I know I just threw at you, but
that's good. And
I'll mute now.
I'll hold my comments until we hear from the others. But good discussion. So I think we had, who is next? Mike. I'm sorry, I forgot my order. Rebecca and then Michael.
Yeah.
So Rebecca, I think you were next. Okay.
I know, I just wanted to make a comment on the promise programs and targeted student aid. For promise programs, like was said, there's so many different designs of them. So it really depends, you know, and many of them just target one sector of higher education, so the community colleges. And so from our perspective, I think we want to make sure that we're targeting students to attend the institution that's the best fit for them. Even our institutions, the private nonprofits, have some form of a promise program at their institutions. But I'd want to, just in terms of design, I think that's important, which is, when we look at student financial aid, it does apply to all sectors. So I just wanted to make that comment.
I have a couple comments. I had the same question that a couple of you had raised about pragmatism or the political reality. And I discussed that with staff at one point. Where I've come down on that, and I want to share that with everybody, is that given the political dynamics in the state, it's very unlikely, it's unlikely that much gets done in the legislature simply because of the dynamics right now. And I don't think that is where we should come down in terms of making our decisions. I think what we're doing here is laying some markers down that where we put out what we think are the best policies to address student debt. And one of the foundations on which I think that has to be based is not just at the back end helping people deal with their debt, but at the front end, even though those are more expensive and not likely to be entertained given the political dynamics in the state. I don't care. And I don't mean to say that, with, I don't mean to say that with a lack of seriousness. But when I say I don't care, I think our responsibility has to be to the students and future students, not to bargaining against ourselves. And I think if we start sitting here saying, well, what would certain politicians, I'm not naming them, but what would certain politicians be willing to go for? We're essentially going to bargain against ourselves to come down with the least common denominator, which will help very few students. And I think the best benefit out of this group, out of this process, would be for us to put forward what is a good plan that deals with student debt at the front end, lays down some markers so that this administration and its people and future administrations will have a set of very solid policies that address this issue, even if they don't get implemented in the next legislative session.
Thank you, Michael, and thank you all. I think Jenny Dye would like to say something. Jenny is sitting in for Derek Campbell and represents the governor's office. And Shane, were you also raising your hand? Okay, so we'll hear from Jenny and then Shane.
Thanks, Secretary Blumenfeld, and glad to be able to join you all today. I wanted to, taking off of Paul's comments, mention that one thing that was on my mind when really looking at these and how to rank them is that, many of the solutions throughout this group, as well as the other groups, are focused on how we address student loan debt going forward. But I think it's really important that the solutions that this task force puts forward also include some solutions on what we do for current borrowers and how we help address that debt load that is tough both for those borrowers, but also has an impact on our economy in terms of their ability to save down payments and buy houses and buy new vehicles and all of the other types of larger purchases that go along with those things. And so, I think refinancing is obviously one of the things that does benefit current borrowers. I think tax credits, depending on how you do that, is another area that could benefit current borrowers. But that's one of the things that, I was trying to wrestle with prioritizing these is a lot of these ideas are really great ideas and they might be sort of in my top two, but I don't necessarily want the top two to only speak to future borrowers and not past borrowers. So just kind of throwing that out there for consideration.
Thank you, Jenny. That's really helpful. And then Shane, and I'm just going to do a quick time check here. It's 12:15. We have until 1 o'clock. I'd like to be able to, by 12:30, narrow down to our two so that we can spend the 15 minutes on each of the two recommendations that we have going forward. So just doing a quick time check there. I'm an accountant. What can I say, right? I think in terms of numbers. So, all right, here we go. So Shane, you're next.
Yeah, I just wanted to add on to what Michael and Rebecca were saying about front end aid. I'm selfish in this because I am an aid administrator, and that would help a great amount of students that I deal with. The other thing that I think about when we're looking at kind of these promise programs and targeted aid, I'm wondering if it would be beneficial for us to look at creating a philosophy of awarding to Wisconsinites. So if we're talking about maybe creating a tiered system of who we want to make sure is the most vulnerable population that we want to help first, and then keep moving down. So to Michael's point of if we're not hitting the points of certain legislators out in the state, if we can't do that, maybe they'll grab onto something in the philosophy and kind of gravitate towards, okay, we want to make sure that we fund this philosophy because it hits my points. So just me continuing to be selfish, that's all.
That's great. Well, this is an excellent discussion, and I think what I'm hearing, I'm just going to try and see if I can summarize this and repeat back, and then you guys tell me if I'm way off base. But I'm hearing that when we look at the different buckets, so Cody, if you can put the polling options slide back up, so it's right in front of us, even though I love seeing all of your faces, that some of these are front-end solutions to help prevent people from getting into debt, and some are back-end solutions, I'll call them, that help current debt holders alleviate some of their problems. So when I look at the 5 buckets, front end would be promise programs and targeted aid on the front end, and back end would be loan forgiveness, refinancing, and tax credits. Does anyone see it differently than that? Okay. So, building on what Jenny said, which I think is great, it might be good to have a recommendation on the front end and a recommendation on the back end, because that's really our charge. And Paul had asked if I can bend the rules. Of course I can bend the rules. Rules were meant to be bent, right? So maybe, and let's talk about this, but if we combine promise programs and targeted aid, does anyone have heartburn with that? Are they very similar in the end, that we're targeting that front end aid, and particularly whether by targeting to specific vulnerable communities? Former foster one has a particular one, but obviously there's low income, there's minorities, there's tribes, there's all different vulnerable communities that our data has informed us have disparate impacts. So let me just take that as a proposal, and let's have discussion around whether they're similar enough to combine those into a front end solution of targeted aid, and the promise program being a piece of that targeted aid. Mike?
I'll start the conversation. Personally, I don't have a problem with that. And that was kind of my point in terms of some of my comments of, narrowing it down to 2 groups, and then there's something in group 3 that I really want to push. This is exactly what I was kind of talking about, or in my mind. My specific example, just to lay out my cards a little bit, is, tax credits and promise programs. But, the discussion that Rebecca Larson had, just getting extra funding there, should be highlighted. And that's where I just wanted to make sure we don't lose some of the other items in the list, because I think you're right. There's some of these things that should be discussed and debated at the legislature level, and we should highlight those things, because again, going back to Alex's comment, that's kind of our charge of, looking at helping some of the less fortunate, low to moderate income individuals, and that's right up the alley. So anyway, I have no problem putting those 2 together. But then I start worrying of, do we start diluting the whole discussion, right? Then we should just put all 5 of them in, right? That's taking the extreme. But so that's my comments, and I'll yield the rest of my time.
Well, so, and again, like Shane, for example, you and Rebecca, you guys have a lot of experience with these programs, and Michael, because you each are involved in some aspect of them. And so are they similar enough to have a front end targeted aid for vulnerable communities, be one of the buckets, or is that diluting too much? Yes, Rebecca.
Yeah, I think they're okay to put in the same bucket, because I do think that it is the front end, solution. But of course, the details matter in terms of what the proposals actually end up being. So, just putting them in there as like, these are the solutions, and we'll, work to refine them and maybe even narrow down further. We could do that, but definitely just noting that the details will matter.
Right. Okay, anyone else have thoughts on combining those as a front end solution, targeting aid for vulnerable communities, and putting those as one?
This is Michael. So I just want to be clear on what's being proposed. It would be targeting aid for vulnerable communities, and then it would be the promise program and the grants. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, those would be like 2 avenues we could recommend as accomplishing the targeted aid for vulnerable communities. One would be through a promise program, and one would be through specific grants. And we can, that's like the next half hour, we can kind of debate that. If people feel like it's one of the options that we want to go with. We may not, if we can figure this out without a poll, that's even better. But if we need to, we'll use that as kind of the winnowing. But we'll combine those two for right now. So if we look at
I mean, I support both of them, although I do think that a statewide promise program, and that's what we're talking about, not individual promise programs, deals with the issue of tuition is kind of a more aggressive approach. We've got the grants, they're underfunded, but even with those grants right now, even as they're underfunded, meaning less people there's people who are eligible who aren't getting them. Even if those got more funded, you'd still have the problem of the problems that are more aggressively dealt with by the promise program. So I support both of them, but I do have that caution.
Okay, thank you. Let's talk about the back end for a minute. We've got 3 back end things. One is a loan forgiveness program. One is refinancing, and as has been brought up very importantly, is those could range from interest rate subsidies for existing refinancing institutions to the state launching its own a refinancing authority. And there's probably something in between where you partner with existing refinancing authority in a different state. So there's like medium, large, and large, I think, in those opportunities. And then the other bucket is tax credits. Let's focus on the back end for a minute and see where people, where their thoughts are, or kind of if you want to advocate for one of those over the other two. Let's have that discussion for the next few minutes. I see Mike's hand.
So, for me, for the refinancing authorities, my comment is access to debt is not the issue, right? I mean, otherwise we wouldn't be talking about it. So I think the refinancing authorities, as Paul had once mentioned, if you're refinancing the debt, the payments aren't going to be the issue, right? They're going to drop $20-30 a month. Granted, the overall interest will drop. The interest they pay over the term will drop, but I just don't see that as plus the infrastructure that have to go in place and a bunch of other stuff. I don't think refinancing authorities is the way to go. However, Paul's comment in terms of subsidies, I think, is a valid discussion that we should talk about, because again, it gets back to the individuals with low credit scores are going to be the issues that are typically impacted. And so in my list, in my top 5, I had refinancing as 5. I'll vote right now, but I think I'd rather spend our resources on something else. And then tax credits, I think, again, within some of those things, I think within that group, I think there's things that are really good, and I think there are things that just probably, while interesting, I think are probably a harder lift, and then just from a lift standpoint, that you're dealing with Department of Revenue and state budgets and things like that. But I think to Michael's point, I think we have to say what we think, and if that's the case, then we need to say it regardless of the political climate. So my thought is, I think from a back end standpoint, the tax credits, specifically the employee benefits and incenting those could be a real benefit on the back end. And you'd have to get DOR involved, obviously. But so that's my comments on those two.
Great, thank you. Who haven't we heard from Anyone that hasn't spoken much that would like to speak up? And I will also point out Jack Porter is on the call again, as well as a resource. So I forgot to call you out at the beginning, Jack. I think he's from the National Governors Association. Thank you for being here as well. So any, let's see. And I know I can't see everyone. Michael is raising his hand. Michael and Paul, then Paul. Okay.
With what Michael just said, I am attracted to the loan forgiveness targeted idea that was proposed. I think it was number 3 in this package. I think that, I mean, we've already talked about the fact that when you refinance, you're essentially refinancing is a pretty good option for people who are at the higher end of the labor market, whether they're engineers, doctors, lawyers, et cetera, people who do end up generally with pretty large debt, but the private refinance market does cover them. But people in other professions like respiratory therapy, therapists, nurses, public school teachers, who end up accruing a significant amount of debt, are in lower paid occupations, and those are occupations where Wisconsin is experiencing labor shortages. It seems to me that a state loan forgiveness program, both helps deal with the labor shortage issue and deals with the student debt problem that those categories of occupations experience. And so I think that's pretty attractive in terms of dealing it at the not at the front end, but at the back end.
Thank you. And Paul, you had your hand up. I think we are gonna call the question in just a bit here. So if you have pressing comments you want to make before we do, then please raise your hand. So Paul?
Mike really kind of covered what I was going to say. I'm very interested in understanding what the possibilities of tax credits are, because I do think it naturally lends itself to focusing on you have more options to target through income levels, and you can even do it regionally, I suppose. And the loan forgiveness is very impactful to people, so I'm very interested in that for the reasons Michael just articulated. I feel like the refinancing area kind of demands our expiration because it is out there, but my own professional experience leads me to think in the end we'll find the impact wasn't as great as we thought. So I'm torn a little bit because I do think we have some obligation as a task force to look at and report on and explain our position on refinancing, because it's out there. It's something I don't know how we ignore. So I don't know how I'll rank them in 2 minutes. I'm still kind of.
It's hard, and I will just say that with 37 proposals, just like when you're running your organization, your business, or whatever, and you've got probably more great ideas than you have resources and people that can execute them. So we're just trying to put forth what we think are some of the very best solutions. We also have legislators on our task force too, and there's nothing that prevents them from picking up a particular tax credit or a particular promise program or a particular any one of these to move forward also in the legislature. We're trying to recommend to the governor what we think are the best proposals to move forward for the budget. But there are multiple ways in which the governor, the legislature, and private organizations and public institutions all can rally around and do different things. So I'll just put that out there as well. So we said there's no magic bullet that is going to solve this problem in Wisconsin. So let me just, I think Cody, as you prepare the poll, because I think we're going to have to just really, in the essence of time, just bring this to a head and pick the two and then discuss more of the details of each of those so that I can write them up. And granted, we probably could talk about this for 18 more hours, right? There's just so much here. So I just want to acknowledge that as well. If you want to combine well, let me just ask the group, yes or no. I think we agreed we would combine promise program and targeted aid, and that would be a front end solution. Should we take that out of the poll then and just really focus on what back end solution we want to move forward with, loan forgiveness, refinancing, or tax credits? Does anyone have a problem with that? Since I'm the rule bender, you can do up or down. Any ups, downs? Okay, and some of you I can't see, but please chat in or speak up if you don't agree with that as a solution. All right, I'll consider the rules bent. So Cody, if you want to just modify the poll to take out promise programs and targeted aid, and we'll know that that's a combined solution that we'll talk about in just a minute. And then really it's just loan forgiveness, refinancing, and tax credits. And let me just add one thing for refinancing. I just want to have one tiny bit of discussion on that because I'm trying to pull out what I think I'm hearing. And what I think I'm hearing is we've heard a lot about refinancing. It's something we ought to be considering. But we're most concerned about how do we get at those more vulnerable communities. So if we could do refinancing, I think, Paul, your recommendation of interest rate subsidies is the one that I see that really targets the people that need it the most, that can't get the refinancing that they have today. So would it be appropriate, I'll ask, in the spirit of rule bending or iteration, to look at refinancing really with like that fourth opportunity, or it could be a third opportunity that has a distinct focus on reaching out to, those Wisconsinites that have no access to refinancing.
So you're proposing that it would all be done through the private market?
I guess I wasn't going that far. I was saying that it would be however we accomplish the refinancing. It could be through the private market, or it could be through the public, a traditional refinancing, but with a segment of that is targeted towards lower credit score individuals.
My concern on voting on it is that if there's a private market that's, I don't mean this in a negative sense, but is creaming the low risk people, it makes it, I've mentioned this adverse selection issue, it makes it a problem and much more expensive to set up a separate entity to do higher risk people, which are generally low income and debtors of color. I'm a little uncomfortable voting on it until I would see more of a concrete proposal on how this issue of adverse selection would be dealt with, or how we would deal with that. The loan forgiveness thing, I'm fine. I like that, but on this, I'm a little uncomfortable voting yes for it until those questions are answered.
Well, I do know that based on the consumer protection group, that anything that would be done with, strict consumer protection, making sure that we're protecting the vulnerable populations. I don't have a public or private thought thought.
My concern is the cost. If for example, we have a robust private market for low risk people. If we then set up a public option, they use a term from a different debate, set up a public option for low risk people, for higher risk people, the cost would be much more because there's so much high risk. And that's the problem that I don't see us addressing, or that would need to be addressed to give me a comfort level.
Paul, you want to comment on that?
Yeah, I would just say that we have not been presented with, nor am I aware of a state authority that is entertaining the risk pool that Michael's addressing, because the states have not wanted to invest in subsidizing the credit performance of those more challenged borrowers. So it really is a difference without a distinction, I think, almost, to say, well, we want a state option that commingles high risk and low risk borrowers. Ultimately, the cost of the higher risk borrowers is going to be borne by somebody. It's either going to be raising the interest cost to those that are prime borrowers, in which case they're not going to seek out the state solution, or someone's going to subsidize the performance of those loans. So that's why in my proposal I did acknowledge that there's going to be a cost to this,
right,
to target those vulnerable populations. So it definitely is not something to ignore. There definitely would be a cost to do that. And whether it's delivered through a state-run program or through subsidizing and incentivizing private capital to flow to those credit groups, there is a model in public housing finance that's done that. I'm not an expert on it, but I do point to that as an example of how that's worked before. But again, it hasn't been free to states. There's been an investment.
Right. Well, good. Okay, I think we got to call the questions. So Cody, if you want to put up a polling slide with the 3 loan forgiveness, refinancing, and tax credits, we will make our call, and then we'll dive a little deeper into the one that rises to the top. If I had Jeopardy music, then I could put it on like do 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 while we're doing it, but I can't sing, and I don't have it handy, but just think of that in your mind. And this will do a time check. We've got about 15 minutes left. I think we delved into some of the discussion already, but Cody, when you're ready, if you want to put the polling slide up, and we will do our voting. So we'll just pick one. Since we moved the front end off of the polling slide, we'll do pick one of the 3. And if I let's see. Oh, here is the poll. Okay. For me, it came on a different screen. So is everyone seeing the poll? It should be up for you.
At this time, I think we are just waiting on, we have Michael, Julie, and I believe Shannon are the remaining task force members to vote.
I don't see the poll. Maybe I'm looking in the wrong place, or
There should be a window that pops up for you.
It hasn't.
You have multiple screens. It might be on your other screen. It was for me.
Well,
Or if you,
A question it's asking us in the written instructions to select our top two.
oh,
Are
it's
we, it should be
only
one,
one.
correct?
Yeah, only one. Sorry, thank
Yeah.
you.
is it this, it says polling options, is this? Is that the screen, polling options?
Yes.
And how do you fill it out?
Hover over it.
Oh, okay.
And then hit submit at the bottom.
I still don't see it.
You could just chat into Cody if that's easier. What if?
Oh, I see it now. Yeah, okay.
Awesome, and I believe we are complete.
All right, drum roll, please, everyone. You want to present the findings? It was close between tax credits and loan forgiveness, but it looks like tax credits has 5 votes and loan forgiveness has 4 and refinancing has 1. So let's focus the rest of our discussion, the last 10 minutes, on tax credits. And I think I have enough to put a recommendation together for the first part based on the strategic targeted aid and promise programs. So I will take a shot at it at least, and hopefully you can entrust me to do that. And let's just talk about the 4 options under tax credits. What spoke to you? So I heard, I'll synthesize what I've heard. I heard Mike talk about employer credits for employees is interesting, as well as Paul mentioning the state tax credits where you might be able to target some of the money to lower income individuals through tax credits. I believe I heard those 2 things out of the conversation. But let me open it up, and who would like to speak? Paul.
Yeah, I just feel like the tax credits, that's what I voted for. There's just so much flexibility that's possible there. And I think even identifying what the cost is and the investment is easier. And I think if you weren't getting the results you wanted, you have the opportunity to adjust it, where some of the others are there's so much investment up front before you find out really what the reward was. I do regret by the voting we aren't going to spend more time on refinancing, because I think that maybe that can happen in some other venue, but I feel like there needs to be kind of a summarizing of, or an explanation of that issue, because I feel like it's out there, and I don't know if it's been really, if any forum has really addressed it comprehensively and written about it. But I support the process, Kathy.
Paul, you talked everybody out of refinance.
Well, we can do this,
That's
Paul.
not true. I tried to talk Kathy into making it one of the ones that we weren't going to vote on, and to vote on the others. But I think it makes sense, though, that we have a balanced approach where we're doing front end and back end. I'm not unhappy about that at all. But I guess Kathy said it the best already. We have to make decisions in our own organizations and businesses, and they're not always easy, especially when you're choosing among competing good ideas.
Right. And two, refinancing. One, there have been bills in the legislature on it, so there is documentation and legislation around it. And two, we can, I mean, again, we're making up the rules here, so we can put a paragraph or two on refinancing and talking about it being, you know, the many forms of it, and it might warrant further discussion. It might not have made the top recommendation, but given there were 4 different, you know, looks at it out of 37, we can make special note of it. So that is very doable. So Catherine, if you want to just grab that as a to-do for us, we can at least put some notes around it. Does that sound all right? Okay, so given that, more discussion around tax credits, please. Rebecca.
Well, I just wanted to agree with what Paul said, just on the tax credits. And, you know, for years, Dr. Waginki's president of WACU has authored a paper, and he, you know, continues to do it on future workers tax credits. So the employer tax credits are really intriguing to him. And I think there's a lot of momentum gaining in that area. So I thought that was just a really good option.
Very good. Other thoughts? Michael.
Skeptic that employers are going to step up and do much. I've been in this game, education game, for 34 years, and I've seen a lot of discussion about it and not much action. And so I'm pretty skeptical about that. I voted for the loan forgiveness because I thought that is something you can really target, and you can target it at you know, people going into lower paid occupations who are going to have a difficult time paying their student debt. And if there is loan forgiveness in those areas, it will make it more attractive to have people go into those areas rather than, you know, finance or legal and so forth.
Thank you. Understood. Other comments on tax credits?
So I voted for loan forgiveness as well, and I'm curious. I would like to hear from the other people who voted for tax credits, the reasons why they also did it. They haven't spoken up. For me, I can go either way on this. Like for the roll call, like my first recommendations were, instead of a front end recommendation, I had targeted aid and promise programs as like my top 2 going into this. From a state tax credit perspective, I like the idea of income tax credits as a method to relieve student loan debt, and also to promote education. I agree with Michael. Like, you have many more years than I do in this game, but even the skin in the game that I've had, selfishly and candidly, we all know I work for CUNY Mutual Group. I think it's pretty impressive that our company, as a way of looking at addressing not just student debt, but also employee engagement, employee benefits, there are other implications that help to attract and retain individuals here. I also recognize the cost associated with it, and also recognize that, again, this isn't for the entire population. This is for a certain population of our workforce that has attained their degree for the most part. And for those that are still seeking to attain their degree, this isn't necessarily going to benefit them while they're still pursuing higher education.
Very good. Other comments? Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I chose tax credits, and really for some of the reasons Paul said, it's very flexible, right? You can target, you know, certain area, even down to counties if you needed to, I guess. But for me, it was really the employee match, right, of what Mutual does. And I think you have to remember that department or that IRS letters, I think only 17 or 18 is when it came out. So it's relatively new from an IRS standpoint. And I think focusing on that from a tax credit standpoint at the state of Wisconsin not only provides some shed some light on that issue, but I think it'll have the biggest impact from people that already have debt. Having the employers kind of step up and incent them to do so, I think is going to be a powerful play there. And then loan forgiveness, that was a tough choice for me between tax credits and loan forgiveness, quite frankly. And again, one of my concerns about picking two, because I think there's some valid points on the loan forgiveness side, but Kathy's going to do a good job of putting this all together anyway. So I think I appreciate the discussion and candor you guys are involved in. It's been a great discussion. So thank you guys all for all of your different perspectives too.
Well, great. Well, we are at about 4 minutes before 1 o'clock, and I do also want to punctuate what Mike just said in terms of an excellent discussion. You guys, everyone brought something unique and different experiences and to the table, and you all participated. I really, really appreciate it. I think I have enough to put together a draft since it's kind of melding together proposals that exist. I did hear a theme of everyone also wanting to target, vulnerable communities that came out in multiple ways. So I'll make sure that that's brought forward both in the front end and the back end solutions to the extent that we can, and that being part of our charge as well. I know it's hard, so thank you. It's really hard to pick when you've got multiple good things in front of you, but I think you guys rose to the occasion and did the job that the governor asked you all to do. And I just want to applaud you for your engagement and for being here. I mean, we had a near perfect attendance. There are a few emergencies that came up, but you guys were here and engaged, and there's still work to be done. So again, we're doing, 1/3 of the work here, 1/3 of the lift. You're also going to have the opportunity to participate in dialogue on the other 4 that come forward from the other groups. And I think you'll all be really proud when you see what the totality of the report and the recommendation looks like when we get through the end. And I hope you'll all be proud to have your name on it. And I know for me personally, I've learned so much through this process and continue to learn. So I appreciate everyone bringing all of that expertise to the table. So with that, if I'll pause and just see, are there any last minute questions or comments before we hit 1 o'clock? You guys are probably all WebExed out, right? Between all the virtual meetings you participate in. But again, I appreciate it. You can always reach out to me or anyone on our team if you have other questions or concerns. Great dialogue, and you are free to go on to the rest of your day. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care and be well, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. All right. Thank you. Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thanks.